I've called you here today
to talk about something that's really important to me. And yes, this may just be an exacerbation of a trigger, but I think this is an important thing to unpack. And if I'm able to draw you in with something that you like, and by making you think that I hate it,
sorry for the clickbait,
then at least we're here and we're able to talk about it. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to a whole world of love. I'm Era of Love, and every time I film, every time I get to this part, I know we're only about 5 seconds in, and I have to explain who I am and what I do, I have an existential crisis because I'm an artist and I'm constantly changing and evolving and don't want to put myself inside a tiny little box. So how about we skip all that and we get to know each other like normal humans over time and through conversation. Today's video, I'll be talking about why I don't like your new favorite song. So let's get into it.
prisoner, prisoner.
My personal connection with this topic is I am an artist and see what's happening? I'm a musician. I make music. I'm also a human being.
Yeah, we know that.
I've also been extremely passionate recently, trying to learn as much as I can and self-educate on the topic of the prison industrial complex, as well as what the future could hold for moving away from prisons. That being said, I do want to drop in a little content warning that throughout this video I will be... Wow, that's really loud. I'm sorry, I'll wait. Should I close the window? I'll close the window. I wanted to drop in a little content warning to let you know that throughout the video I will be discussing the prison industrial complex. So if you or a family member has experienced the wrath of this oppressive system firsthand and it's emotionally sensitive for you, triggering, or just not really helpful to talk about it in this kind of format, I completely understand, and I hope you do something amazing for yourself right now and today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and maybe I'll see you for the next video. Alright, in addition to that, I just want to put forth my blind spots on this topic. As I talk about issues that primarily affect people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, and Hispanic people, I want to make it really clear that I'm really sharing my sparse understanding, as well as a little bit of my personal experience having a family member in the prison system. But in no way can I personally reflect the experiences or understandings of all people, first of all, but especially when I'm talking about topics that affect people of color. I can't replace their voices in any way, and I wouldn't want to. So linked down below are plenty of amazing voices of whom I have learned from. We'll just go with that sentence, hoping that it made sense. It's a sense tense. There are plenty of amazing creators, thought leaders, artists, writers, and people that I have learned from. You'll see that I'll definitely be citing some books, but I've also just been learning in general about these topics from many different people, so I'll try to just link as many as I can. So today we're talking about the song Prisoner by Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa. This was Miley's single off of her new album Plastic Hearts that is doing really, really well right now. It has a ton of listens on all different streaming platforms, as well as raving reviews from basically every single outlet that I was able to dig up an article from. The only article I found that was even a little bit critical was this one. And they basically just said that they would have liked the lyrics to go a little bit deeper into Miley's personal experience, but I kind of have the opposite critique, where I feel like Miley really dug into her personal experience, but wasn't really able to contextualize that based on what society is experiencing right now as a whole and make it relevant or appropriate in that way. If anything, it kind of stood out as inappropriate, and we'll talk about why. The song itself includes stylings and soundscapes that are very reminiscent of 80s music and a lot of Miley's favorite idols. The lyrics go on to express this very powerful, fierce chorus that has this visceral metaphor, prisoner, that Miley expressed is trying to portray her inner experience in her mind when she was trying to leave a relationship and felt imprisoned to the desire to go back again and again. It goes on to express a couple different verses, one by Dua Lipa and then the next by Miley, that both have almost a playfulness, a sensuality to them that to me created a bit of dissonance between the chorus and the verses when societally contextualized. As for the music video, it has a lot of dark imagery, and a lot of it is again paying homage to some of Miley's favorite 80s artists, while also again maintaining this bold sexuality as well as a playful demeanor between Dua and Miley. Miley was quoted sharing that she felt the lyrics were exactly authentic to what she was experiencing. And in no way do I want to disarm that experience for her, because divorce is no easy thing to go through. And in many ways, a metaphor is meant to serve as an exacerbated, visceral experience for the listener that makes them feel the intensity of someone's experience. Maybe you're even taking an experience that was drawn out over the course of months or years and trying to pack it into one metaphor. So using something like prisoner that's so visceral and so intense might feel right. In the book Writing Better Lyrics by Pat Pattison, Pattison describes a metaphor as a collision between ideas that don't belong together. They go on to say a metaphor must be literally false. So Miley's metaphor is literally false. She was not a prisoner of her experience. But before I make my main criticism and we start to back that up, I do want to say that even based on just my general understanding of songwriting as I know it, there's nothing inherently wrong with this song. Actually, I think it's a really fantastic song. I think the music is so well orchestrated in terms of making a cohesive sound, using editing techniques that flawlessly flow one part into the next, using signature writing styles like a rising pre-chorus to build anticipation to that strong and powerful chorus. All in all, it's a really good song, but I have this thing about me that when I try to listen to a pop song or read something in the mainstream, I go into an existential crisis. Man, this is becoming a theme for me. But I can't help but societally contextualize something that clearly the artist didn't do themselves. And there are plenty of artists right now who are societally contextualizing their writing, or they're writing for the self with a capital S. They're writing not just for their own experience, but they're writing for society's experience, for everyone's collective community experience. And in many ways, I think Miley expressed in her interview and in other interviews that this is something she wants to do. So in no way am I criticizing her as an individual. I haven't even presented my criticism yet, but we're gonna get there, and I just want to make sure that I put something out here. I'm always trying to live by the quote from the late Michael Brooks, who said, "Be kind to people and hard on systems." Do I think that Miley was intentionally writing out of touch? No, of course not. Do I think she was intentionally writing to try to harm people who have been negatively impacted by the prison industrial complex? No, of course not. I think she's a really compassionate human being based on what she's shared, but I do think that wealth and whiteness create a divide between understanding that we have to constantly be seeking to fill with understanding of experiences that we haven't had. Again, it seems like Miley does want to do this, and Dua Lipa comes from a family of refugees. So I do believe that both of them have understanding and compassion, and the metaphor itself goes by textbook. It makes sense. But what happens when that metaphor, though literally false in the context it's being used, is very, very true for so many people in a modern context, in a societal lens? What happens when popular music and what is mainstream and very widely listened to is striking a nerve with an issue that goes undiscussed in the present times? What happens when the metaphors we're using to describe experiences that everyone can have are making direct comparisons to experiences that disproportionately affect people of color? This is where I get uncomfortable and see a problem with this metaphor being used in the era of mass incarceration. My main criticism that I'm going to present is that the song Prisoner and its creators are profiting off of sensationalizing a very real and in many cases traumatic experience for millions of Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and poor people in the supposed United States of America. We're on stolen native land. The song also serves to trivialize this experience by comparing it directly to relationship issues void of state violence. And finally, it serves to continue the normalization of and desensitization to the prison industrial complex. In many ways, my issue with this song reminded me a lot of the TikTok mugshot challenge. I don't know if you remember this or if you saw this or cared about this, but essentially there was a TikTok makeup challenge that a lot of people were doing. I think it was last year or in 2019.
Oh, 2019. The one that got away.
The mugshot challenge was a makeup challenge where people were using makeup to present themselves as if they were in a mugshot. So part of this was to make themselves look more tired, disheveled, and in some cases even create signs of violence like black eyes. Others might have paired this challenge with a disheveled hair look or a look of confusion and dismay. I think it goes without saying why this is so taboo and insulting to so many people, but I want to bring in a quote by Angela Davis in Are Prisons Obsolete that says, "The question of whether the prison has become an obsolete institution has become especially urgent in light of the fact that more than 2 million people now inhabit U.S. prisons, jails, youth facilities, and immigrant detention centers. Are we willing to relegate ever larger numbers of people from racially oppressed communities to an isolated existence marked by authoritarian regimes, violence, disease, and technologies of seclusion that produce severe mental instability? According to a recent study, there may be twice as many people suffering from mental illness who are in jails and prisons than there are in all psychiatric hospitals in the United States combined." So not only is the system itself violent, and a lot of these injuries that might come from a mugshot are from police violence itself, as well as we just read, a lot of the experience of confusion and delirium and some of the expressions that these people were mocking come from the crisis of mental illness within the prison system today. Now, when this challenge happened, there were definitely a lot of critical reviews like these, but there were also a lot of defenders of the challenge like these. Overall, I want to take this time to request a higher self-awareness from both the industry as well as listeners and consumers. In no way am I trying to police creative freedom. Let me make that very clear, because I think it's important that we write truthfully to whatever is truthful to us at the time. And I do believe that this song is inherently truthful. I just think it unveils a dark truth about the time that we're living in, which is the conversation of prison abolition, or even moving in the direction of a system not oriented around violence and isolation and degradation. This conversation is considered taboo still. And even amongst people on the left or in liberal spheres, a lot of the conversation boils down to languaging critiques. So in no way am I trying to create that type of conversation at all. Honestly, I'm really just using this song as an excuse to talk about a topic that is important to me, because I've called you here today to talk about something that's really important to me. And yes, this may just be an exacerbation of a trigger, but I think this is an important thing to unpack. And if I'm able to draw you in with something that you like, and by making you think that I hate it, sorry for the clickbait, then at least we're here and we're able to talk about it, because it really is important. In an interview, wow, that's hard to say. In an interview, Miley Cyrus spoke about writing this song and the lyrics of this song as a portrayal of her inner experience, feeling stuck and unable to escape the urge to go back to someone that she had recently experienced divorce from. But in a later interview with Apple Music's Zach Lowe, Miley disclosed that she had recently been exploring what I interpreted as mindfulness meditation. She was able to look at the thoughts in her mind and noticed that there were voices speaking, and then there was an observer. So Miley expressed that she was able to see self as the observer, while the other voices were not the purest form of self. They were projections, they were thoughts, they were the mental chatter, but they were not self. And in a lot of ways, this to me is a response to the lyrics of Prisoner that Miley was trying to portray. She didn't feel that type of freedom at the time of writing it, and now came across this conclusion that she could free herself from those patterns. In a lot of senses, I feel similar about the natural progression of our outlook on prisons. Angela Davis, in Are Prisons Obsolete, has this to say: even amongst those who must regrettably accept prison sentences, especially young people, as an ordinary dimension of community life, it's hardly acceptable to engage in serious public discussions about prison life or radical alternatives to prison. It is as if prison were an inevitable fact of life, like birth and death. I find this to be so powerful, because in the same way that at the time Miley felt like a prisoner to that experience of leaving a relationship that didn't feel right and saying, enough is enough, I'm not going to go back. That felt impossible to her at the time, and then later she was able to come to the conclusion that actually it was possible not only to remove herself from that situation, but to cut ties with the voices in her own mind that said things like, that's not possible, and to form a new relationship with oneself. In the same way, Angela Davis is proposing that we've kind of lost our ability to even use our imagination to explore potential other ways of being in society that don't include prisons, or this conversation is deemed taboo and foolish, as Davis herself uses the word in Are Prisons Obsolete. But why? Why did this happen, and how did this happen? When crimetologists, right before the war on drugs began, As Michelle Alexander perfectly outlines in her book, The New Jim Crow, climatologists were anticipating prisons becoming more and more obsolete. It came as a shock to climatologists and regular human beings living in this country when Ronald Reagan launched a campaign to not only invest in a boom of the prison population, but also invest in changing the hearts and minds that felt this wasn't necessary. In addition to that, he launched a campaign against anyone that had other ideas or insights, such as Angela Davis herself, removing them from their positions of teaching and thought leadership, and exterminating any potential for other ideas that could lead to a society beyond policing and prison. Now, Miley is not the first one to write a song called Prisoner or Prisoner of Love, or to write a song using this metaphor. 99.9% of these songs all are using the metaphor in a very similar way, relating the experience of a prisoner to some kind of relationship challenge. The worst amongst these, I would say, in my opinion, is Ryan Adams, whose song Prisoner goes deep into this metaphor, really portraying almost every single aspect of the prison industrial complex and pipeline as a really complex metaphor for a relationship challenge. The best of these, in my opinion, was John Denver's Prisoners, which commented on the very serious toll that being a prisoner can take on a relationship, which is where my issue in these other songs really lies, is that the experience of being imprisoned affects so many relationships, and people truly are helpless. 97% of people don't see their day in court. Michelle Alexander outlines so eloquently in The New Jim Crow. I recommend that book to absolutely everyone, especially white people who grew up affluent, privileged, and comfortable, and really don't understand what it's like to grow up in an impoverished area, a disenfranchised community, where at every corner people are set up to slip into this system. And the priority is not to aid the community or ensure the health of the community, but truly to exploit and oppress. Now, throughout history, alongside a lot of these songs, there has always been a positive counterculture and always will be. A lot of this positive counterculture lives and breathes in the communities of independent artists and local music. So one thing I'd really like to encourage you to do is to seek local music wherever you are, and you don't have to go out to do this, by the way. So even in the current times, you can hop on any of your social medias and search for local artists in your area, and then follow them on Spotify or Apple Music. Make yourself a local music playlist, or if you're in my area, you can check out my local music playlist, which will be linked below. Now, why is independent art a counterculture to detached mainstream art? Well, for one thing, it's not corporate funded. It's not funded from the top, from white, wealthy men, mostly, who might not have all the say in what's produced and released, but they definitely have some. And I do want to say that this, in particular, has definitely improved over time. In the time that Billie Holiday was releasing music, for instance, she was faced with the challenge of presenting one of the most real and visceral songs of the era, Strange Fruit. She presented this song to her main record label, and they turned her down for it, saying that they weren't willing to cut the record. So she had to go to a smaller label to produce the song, and eventually this led to a very dangerous situation for Billie, just because she spoke the truth in her music. But nowadays we see artists like her releasing songs like I Can't Breathe that are works of art interwoven with messages of activism and truth, and also are in the mainstream. So in this way, I do see that progress has been made. The irony is, if an artist is willing to be very truthful about oppressive systems in their art or music, they might risk being sought after by the prison industrial complex and the government and imprison themselves, like Billie Holiday was. But we're going to talk about Billie's whole story in the next video, so be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this and if you want to stick around for that video. And hit the bell so you know when I post it. In an article on artprize.org entitled "How Can You Be an Artist and Not Reflect the Times?", Nicole Carruth explores the concept of truthful art, art reflecting the times, and art interwoven with activism. The quote that was coined as the title of this comes from the powerful artist Nina Simone. The full quote reads, "At this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when everything is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times?" That, to me, is the definition of an artist. The writer went on to express how they felt about an exhibit in Grand Rapids, saying, "Reflecting the time seemed important for Grand Rapids, where conversations on activism and race probably don't occur often in the context of art. For me, however, the program left something to be desired. I craved more emotional charge and even a moment of discomfort. This discussion felt polite and cautious. I also wished for a greater recognition of place, for panelists to draw connections between this conversation inside and the context outside. I believe it's all artists' jobs to be as truthful as we possibly can. And like I said earlier, I do believe this song to be inherently truthful, just in a highly revealing way that isn't necessarily flattering to our current culture. It highlights the disconnect between wealth and whiteness with the actual experience that plenty of people of color, Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic people in this country have experienced within the system of the prison industrial complex. Moving on, I'd like to discuss the gatekeeping of capital that's involved in the music industry, as well as more industries than you think. But in this case, we'll be talking about the gatekeepers of musical capital, like streaming services, Spotify, Apple, and record labels. So, local artists, like we were talking about, nowadays, even if they're not part of a record label, still experience this gatekeeping of capital through the system of streams. Because most of us are distributing our music through streaming platforms, the capital is hoarded and then redistributed by people who just happen to have more capital than the rest of us, so they were able to set up a gate. Now, again, this isn't the only situation in which this occurs. There are so many, including things like housing and water, basic human needs. I mean, you could argue that making art and music is also a basic human need, but you know, the most basic of the most basic human needs are even gate-kept in this country. And this does affect the type of music that is funded. This does affect the way that these ideas are presented. My overall personal experience is that I just wish mainstream or the most funded art was also the most truthful art, but it just isn't right now because of the power structures in place and because of the narratives being washed and controlled in many senses, just like we talked about a little bit with Strange Fruit. And a lot of that is behind the scenes as well, or subliminal. But the truth is that maybe this song succeeded, because in the same article on artprize.org, Nicole wrote of thoughts shared by artist Dred Scott. In the article it reads, "Dred Scott made it a point to distinguish the role of artist from activist, drawing a line between artwork that raises awareness and certain actions or demands to achieve social change. Activism often has a particular purpose," he said. "We're trying to stop, say, murder by police or end mass incarceration. With my art, I'm actually talking about these broader social questions, huge questions confronting humanity. Art itself is not the fight for a better future, he suggested, but the vehicle for getting people to think about what's happening now and what our future could be. So maybe, based on this understanding and definition, Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa succeeded at that. I mean, this got me thinking and toiling with what could be, because the blind spot was so highlighted. Even in its unawareness, it did bring about change and awareness. And again, I don't want to emphasize these criticisms on the individuals, but rather the system, and not to mention the years of campaigns and effort put into desensitizing people or sensitizing them into fear and making them think that this is normal, when in reality, the way that our prison system functions is not normal. And it's not the way that climatologists thought things were going to go. It's not the way that they felt things needed to go, but it is the way things went. And the reason for that is similar to the music industry: profit and wealth and capital gatekeeping. With the boom of prisons also meant the boom of prison labor, as well as disenfranchisement of poor, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and people of color in our country. My final words on this topic is to encourage you to take action by listening to local artists. Look out for groups in your town that are working towards the idea of police as well as prison abolition, and make connections with people in your town. Hear people's stories and learn as much as you can so that we can move towards a better future. And so we can look back and see the progress we've made to build a society without prisons. Thank you so much for listening and for being here with me today. It's such an honor, and I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you. Please be sure to leave a comment so I can hear your thoughts and we can discuss. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you know when my next video is posted, and like this video if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Instagram at awholeworldoflove. Check out my website, awholeworldoflove.com, and follow me on Twitter at awholeworldofl1. It was so nice to be here with you. I'm so grateful. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.